E-bikes outride because e-bikes are fun to ride. I'm going to do a little video here on some e-bike maintenance. And the model here is the Switch 100, also known as the Prince, also known as the Urban. Why does the bike have multiple names? Well, that's because Chinese factories sell the bike to various distributors and stores, and those stores put their own name on it. It's the exact same bike from the exact same factory. Anyway, this is a website that I used to have up. The reason I took it down is because of everybody that ever bought a bike, nobody had ever been to the website. So why pay for a website when it's not generating sales or getting views? Although it was getting lots of views, just not from the people that were buying bikes. Anyway, here's a section that I had put up on maintenance, and we're just going to go through some basic stuff here. On this particular model, there is a crankshaft and two such chains. So let me pull up a larger picture of that. So this secondary chain gives you just a little bit more of a mechanical advantage, and it puts the pedals in a slightly better position ergonomically for pedaling. But anyway, there is a bolt here that goes through the axle and locks this sprocket in place. And unfortunately, over time, if this metal isn't strong enough, the axle will literally cut the bolt. And then it drops off, and suddenly you are able to pedal your crankshaft, but the chain isn't doing anything. You're not actually pedaling the bike. You're just going around and around in circles. So if that ever happens, you just simply need to grab another bolt and put it through the axle, and you're good to go again. In an emergency, if you're out on the road and this ever happens to you, just look for a nail or a stick, even something on the ground that you can just shove in there temporarily to get you home, kind of thing. Okay, so how to remove a tire in order to patch it. A lot of people have a lot of trouble getting the tire off their bike in order to do a simple patch. Well, this blue line is where the edge of your tire usually sits on the rim. And what you need to do is you deflate the tube in the tire and you push the tire into this valley in the rim. And here's a picture of the actual rim to compare with the little drawing that I have. So as you can see, this is the edge, and here is that little valley. So you push the rubber off of the edge into the valley, and that gives you more play in which to get the edge of the tire over the rim. Now the replacement tubes can be 16 by 2, 16 by 2 and 125, or 16.2.25. They can even be smaller 14-inch tubes, because once they're on the rim and you inflate them, they fill to expand to the size of the tire. Of course, it's much easier to deal with a 16-inch tube than it is with a 14-inch tube. But in a pinch, you can stick a 14-inch tube on this tire. And tires can be 16 by 3 or 16 by 2.5. 16 by 2 will probably work, but you're kind of pushing it. You should stick to the 16 by 3. That's what the rim is designed for. Now, the reason you can get away with that is because, again, the tube will push the tire when it's inflated. And you got to be careful when you're ordering tires online as well, because some companies measure them differently. Some of them, it's from the center point to the road surface. Others, it's from the center point to the rim. And, well, you get mismatches in sizes. Now, one of the things you can do is you can actually put two tubes in your tire. And to do that, you would need to drill a second hole for that tube. So you do that 180 degrees on the opposite side of the rim. And this way you can have either two tubes in there, both partially inflated, or one tube deflated and the other one inflated, and that way if you get a flat, you just simply inflate the second tire. And for some reason on e-bikes, it always seems to be that you're always getting the flat on the back tire. Now, if you're ever out there someplace and you do get a flat, and it is the back, and you're tempted to drive home on the flat tire, don't do it, because you'll destroy your rim. But if you're absolutely going to do it, at least take the tube off the front tire and put it onto the back tire so that you're driving on the front rim, because it's a hell of a lot cheaper to replace the front rim than it is to replace the back rim. Now, I don't know if this type of product has become commonplace yet, but you can actually, instead of trying to remove the tube, you can just use a type of tube that's very easy to remove, and it's called a fly bike tube, I guess. And here's a little video that they have. Or it's so you see right here, one end of the tube, it's a straight tube, one end has a circle, and your stem goes through the circle. And then you've got a circular tube. So it makes it real easy to remove a tube and replace it with another one. Now, whether or not they've got them in the size that we're looking for this particular bike, 16-inch by 3, is another question. It's a bit of a specialty product right now. But anyway, on to the actual maintenance that I meant to talk to you about, and it is the brakes. So on the front, you've got this little lever, which is your brakes. And here's the back side of it. And over here is an example of what operates. So it flexes at this, rotates I should say, not flex, rotates from this point out and in when you pull the brake. And of course the spring that's in behind this little black rubber pushes it back. Well, over time, this little lever can get gummed up and it'll start to stick. So what you can do is you take it all apart and you submerge this part right here, as it is, in a mild acid. Now don't panic when I say acid. It can be a mild acid like vinegar. And what you do is you just slowly work it back and forth in the vinegar until it's moving freely, and then you keep doing it for a little while, and then when it's moving absolutely freely, leave it submerged in the vinegar overnight, and then come back and say 3 or 4 hours, or overnight 8 hours, whatever you want to do, and maneuver it some more just to make sure that all the gunk is out of there, and then you can put it back together. Now if you want, you can use an industrial strength acid, but you're going to have to use rubber gloves and full face protection, etc. if you do that sort of thing. Just be patient, use vinegar. You don't need to worry about any of that stuff, and it works. And the back one, the back brake, is similar, but I've never had to do that sort of maintenance on the back. The back, because it's inside this cover plate, seems to be much better protected from getting gunk into the mechanism. Not only that, but it also has a protection of the back covers going back to the wheel. And when your brake pads eventually do wear out to the point where you need to get them replaced, take the pads out, take them to any local scooter shop, motorcycle shop, so that they can see them and measure them, and they can order you a replacement set. They're pretty common. They're the exact same type of pads that are used on mopeds. And the cost on them I've seen range from $10 to $50. And take note of the springs and how far apart they are spaced from the center bar. So up here in this picture here, make sure that you understand the spacing, because on some pads the spacing of these holes is different, and they may or may not come with required springs, or they may be formed completely differently and interfere with the axle. So make sure they're shaped the same kind of thing. And just the thing on light bulbs, make sure you're actually using the proper voltage bulbs for your bike. The Nikon Prince and Urban, for instance, are a 48 volt bike, and they use 48 volt light bulbs. If you try and stick in a 12 volt light bulb into a 48 volt system, it's going to blow that light bulb up rather quickly. Some bikes have a DC to DC converter that steps down the voltage from 48 to 12 volts. So if you really cannot find 48 volt light bulbs anywhere, yes, you can use a 12 volt one, but you've got to interrupt the wiring going to that light bulb with some sort of a DC to DC converter, or with some sort of resistor that'll drop the voltage down to 12 volts. And a couple places I found online that you can order bulbs is bulbtown.com and scooterpartscatalog.com. Now, the only moving part in your motor is the bearing. So here's an example of the bearing on the front. And way down here at the bottom, here is the bearing on the inside of the motor. So this little bearing is the only moving part. So it's, of course, the only real part that can wear out mechanically. And if you ever need to order them, that's what they look like. Okay, so that's pretty much it for this maintenance video, but let's just end it here with a nice little look at the controllers, just for those of you that have never seen inside of one and were kind of curious what they look like. Various controllers come apart differently. Some of them have heat transfer bars like this, others just screw directly to the side of the case, and they have the heat transfer bars in the side. But anyway, that's what it looks like. And you've got capacitors in here, and these capacitors, once you hook them up to a battery, they take a charge, and they hold that charge even if you've turned the bike off and disconnected the batteries. So there's still a good 63 volt charge in this controller. So don't think you can go poking around with the wiring even though the batteries are disconnected, unless you've disconnected the controller, because the controller has a charge, and it's like getting hit with a stun gun. If you hit the wrong wires while that's still connected, you give yourself quite a jolt. 48 volts of electricity is more than enough to do welding with. And here's the rating, 63 volts in the 500 watt controller. That's what that 63V is. So that's it for this video, and here at the top of my page I had a spare parts list of websites that you can check out to see if they have parts that you need if you ever do need parts. Have fun e-biking.